A lot of those stereotypes would say, they're 30-year-old unemployed males who live in their parents' basements and watch cartoons all day. This is not the case. That in fact, they are a highly educated group of heterosexual males. Heterosexual males. Heterosexual males. Heterosexual males. This is a direct quote lifted from the 2012 documentary Bronies, the Extremely Unexpected Adult Fans of My Little Pony, as stated by psychologist Patrick Edwards. Throughout the entire documentary, it makes one statement abundantly clear. Gay bronies are a harmful stereotype.
He might be thinking that I'm gay.
Suddenly, maybe you're homosexual and then it's a reason to hate you.
You gotta stop this pony little gay girly shit.
You must be, feminine or gay or whatever.
At one point, bronies being negatively associated with homosexuality was spoken in the same breath as pedophilia.
I think I asked if they were gay.
Old men, like pedophiles.
More flamboyant.
He dresses like a girl.
There's definitely sexual deviancy involved.
This sets a precedent that being gay is as harmful to the perception of the brony fandom as being a pedophile. But after 15 years of this fandom existing, it's time to admit this is kind of gay. For a fandom whose thesis is love and tolerance, it's kind of hard to imagine that there was a time where homophobia was a big issue. A lot of this homophobia was a reaction from outsiders. You see, if somebody or a group of people decide to break societal norms, outsiders might try to find some way to justify that anomaly in order to maintain the status quo. So, seeing a bunch of men contribute into an effeminate hobby, they assume they have to be gay. Thusly comes a response to try to prove that the brony fandom is actually super straight and not gay at all. Think of characters like Brayburn or Stephen Magnet all the way back in season 1, where they would be the recipient of some not so savory jokes about their sexuality. There are several posts, even dating as soon to the finale of the series, that try to push back or correct these assertions. But at some point, it no longer just became about gay men and looped all the way back around to include the rest of the LGBT community. You've probably seen dozens of those Rainbow Dash is not a lesbian poster memes. These are such a relic of a bygone era of the internet because if they were made today, it would always be perceived as ironic, but back then, these people were so sincere. They hated the idea of Rainbow Dash possibly kissing another woman because they just need to have Rainbow Dash in their head slop ships that has the exact same flavor palette as rice and boiled chicken. Which, by the way, for some of you out there, Rainbow Dash is not going to be your trad wife no matter how hard you try, but probably the most extreme and publicized instance of homophobia in the fandom is relatively forgotten about now. Friendship is Insolence was a lost fan fiction that is effectively an unhinged homophobic rant where the author would brutally kill fanfiction writers who wrote about gay ships. This fanfiction was even posted to Equestria Daily, which needs moderator approval. When explaining what happened to let this fanfiction get posted, it exposed countless issues with the mentality that the fandom had at this time. In the email the author sent to the moderator, it admits that the fanfiction is about making fun of the whole lesbian pony obsession, and after only skimming a couple of words, they thought it was fine to publish. They did in fact remove the fanfiction, but not before saying that they were standoffish about gay male ships. So it seems like they were okay with homophobia to some specific extent. Also, I know that this post can easily be looked up, but don't bother this guy, this was made over 10 years ago. But what about today? How did the brony fandom at large escape their negative feelings towards queer people? Well, there wasn't one unifying moment that got the brony fandom to wake up, but a series of multiple smaller events. It's important to begin this conversation by acknowledging the fact that being a brony is inherently queer. You may be cisgender and heterosexual, but your participation in the brony fandom ends up furthering the queer community. It takes us back to the idea that being a brony inherently breaks societal norms about gender. You break these gender norms, meaning that they end up becoming more normalized in society, so queer people have a space to be more easily accepted. It's much like how drag is heavily associated with queerness. You can still participate as a cis-het man, but it doesn't make the action any less queer. So by some level of the brony fandom inherently existing, it's a little gay. And that's alright. If somebody assumes you're gay, then you shouldn't be embarrassed about it. Because if you're comfortable and confident enough in your sexuality, then you wouldn't have to prove your straightness to other people. It is their problem if they're unable to see the difference, not yours. So with a show that enables its audience to be emotionally vulnerable and break societal traditions, somebody who watches the show may look inward and discover parts of themselves that they never even considered. This leads to fans with homophobic insecurities being outweighed by people who are able to fully accept themselves. And what helped this shift in the fandom is younger fans becoming adults. They are able to find and foster a better community within each other, and are less likely to harbor the same insecurities from older generations. Many of them could have had their first exposure to queerness from fan works. To them, being a homophobic brony just doesn't make any inherent sense. It would be as ridiculous as having racist bronies. Scratch that last thought. But the point still stands that it fell out of place for bronies to have such strong prejudice, so new gen fans unironically adopted the principles of love and tolerance. To an extent, some TikTok fans are pretty annoying. It's actually pretty funny to look back at old fan content, specifically ones featuring a romantic storyline, and try to find some way to justify characters who have zero romantic chemistry with the opposite sex just to force them into straight relationships. Like in Bride of Discord, they were so adamant about giving every member of the main six a husband and children that they couldn't figure out who Applejack should marry, so they pair her up with a minor.
I love him, okay? It sounds crazy, but I love him. I know he's a little young, but it's only a 7-year difference.
Once again, may I remind you how being gay was once seen almost as taboo as being a pedophile? Eventually, as the show continued, Hasbro progressively began to unclutch their pearls, giving the writers and artists just a little bit more wiggle room to incorporate elements of queerness into the show, with the most notable example being the very romantic overtones of Applejack and Rainbow Dash relationship towards the end of the series, and especially at the finale, with writer Jim Miller stating that it's up to personal interpretation, meaning it's completely possible. We have now reached the summit of this conversation, which is to say we have entered a postmodern era of queer fan content for My Little Pony. I already discussed Violet Pony in a previous video, check that out if you haven't already, but there is a specific fandom animator that has caught my eye in the last year that perfectly represents this change in mentality. You know him, you love him, it is the one and only Tamers12345. Tamers has had a long history of animations with crude humor and a variety of different fandoms, including Sonic Underground, Dandy's World, and of course, My Little Pony. A common theme in Tamers' videos is homosexuality, and not in a sincere way, but in a way that's mostly a joke. And that's not me getting offended about it, it is genuinely funny. But things began to shift when he gave Braybird and Soren their own story arc. Between the jokes lies a genuinely heartbreaking story about how the effects of a homophobic society can lead to self-destructive behaviors in queer people. If you're an adult and are able to tolerate lowbrow humor, I genuinely recommend these videos. It does get pretty suggestive at times, to the point where I'm wondering if Tamers is projecting just a little bit. And if he is or isn't, it's none of my business. And I think that matters most, because at some point for a fandom who is almost 2 decades old, it's really not worth getting this mad at other people. And I hope all of you guys at home hold this mentality, because if you've been watching my videos and think otherwise, then I have no clue why you like me. I have no end video question for you guys today, just show each other love and we can make the fandom a better place. So that's all the time I have for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I've been May and I'll see you next time.